What's going on, everybody? Sonar here, and this is a tournament breakdown for stop number 6 on the FLW Tour, Lake Chickamauga. So let's talk about Lake Chickamauga. You know, the FLW Tour stop number 6. This was a very, very key tournament for me. You know, it was a tournament that really, you know, going into the last 2 events of the season, I needed to maintain some really good momentum at Lake Chickamauga going into Lake Champlain, because I had a big lead on Rookie of the Year, and I also had the overall points lead in Angler of the Year. So it was really important for me to have a good solid finish here. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Lake Chickamauga is a fantastic fishery. It's one of the best big bass fisheries in the country, and also has a ton of numbers too. So Lake Chickamauga, there's nothing wrong with this lake, but unfortunately, I was just a couple steps behind the entire tournament. Let me set it up for you. First off, this event was, you know, in early May. We're talking about both spawn and post-spawn fish, and a little bit of pre-spawn fish as well. So it was just kind of a weird situation where you've got a dynamic where you've got plenty of spawners, you've got some fish starting to funnel offshore onto those ledges, but not too great yet. And so everything was going on. So it was really pick your poison and figure out how to make that work to your advantage to get those bigger than average bites. And for me, during practice, you know, I ran around to all my offshore areas, found a couple that had some fish on them. I felt confident that I could maybe pick 1 or 2 up and maybe possibly a bigger bite. And then I also had a shallow water deal going on, and I chose the shallow water location that I wanted to fish based on the proximity to the offshore stuff, because I wanted to have as much options as humanly possible. So I stayed down in the Chester Frost, Harrison Bay area for both shallow water fishing and the offshore fishing, and that ended up being kind of the kiss of death for me, because I really, that first day of the tournament, really focused on you know, sampling my offshore areas in the morning. And then once I realized that the offshore areas that I had chosen weren't really working to my advantage, and I wasn't really getting dialed in on them, that's when I started going shallow. And during practice, I had found a bunch of quality fish up shallow the last day of practice. You know, the females had moved up on the beds here in the Chester Frost and Harrison Bay area. And so I figured that you know, even if those females started moving off the beds, there'd still be enough for me to be able to get 1 or 2 big bites a day. And I wasn't really worried about catching a limit. And I ended up being wrong. Because I got to my areas, right off the bat was catching a ton of fish. Got a limit very quick as soon as I got into the shallow water and started fishing for those bedding fish. I wasn't necessarily looking at them, but I was looking for the type of area that they were going to be bedding on, and I'd throw a wacky rig or some other finesse tactic at them. And what I started to realize is fish after fish were all in that 1.5 to 2.25 pound range, and I wasn't seeing any size above that. And you know, honestly, when you start having that kind of situation in a tournament, a lot of times you need to make a decision and just abandon that pattern, especially in a tournament like this where big fish are key. to doing well. You know, just having a limit isn't going to do you anything. But unfortunately, I didn't make that move. I just continued to hope and pray that I'd get a shot at a 5+ pound bite every single day. And that first day, it just didn't happen. I caught about 40 fish. You know, it was fun setting the hook on all these fish, but it was very frustrating to see that I couldn't get a 3+ pound bite. I never got a 3-pound bite that day, and ended up with 12-10, I believe, for the day, which put me at like 90, mid to late 90s as far as my placement for day 1. And instead of making a drastic change on day 2, I did have a plan to fish more isolated stuff as I moved up the lake, start in the Chester Frost, Harrison Bay area, get my limit, and then start working my way up and hopefully luck into you know, a couple of easy to catch big fish. I followed that game plan, you know, caught a limit fairly early again. It was a little bit slower that day because I'd already picked off the fish in this area, and again, did not even see any bigger fish up shallow. So I really was just banging my head against the wall, fishing for those small buck males. And what I realized after this event, watching the live coverage on FLWfishing.com, is that the guys that were doing well up shallow, John Cox, David Dudley, Matt Greenblatt, Jarek McMillan, all those guys were fishing the same exact patterns, the same exact lures that I was, but I realized that they're fishing a different region. They're fishing up the river where the fish are primarily shallow for a greater period of time. They're more accessible, even those females. Even if they get off the beds, they're still going to be around that shallow cover. But here in this region of the lake, the lower region of the lake, I realized that there's a narrow window where those females are accessible in spawning mode. And unfortunately, I missed that narrow window. That window really opened up the last day of practice, so that wave of spawners went up, the females laid their eggs, and then all that was left was the males. And so I wasn't fishing any of those transition zones, you know, those areas where the females could possibly be post-spawned up, waiting to go out to the main lake. Instead, I just continued fishing shallow for those spawners. So that was the big lesson of this event, you know, and I've always struggled on TVA lakes. In fact, all of my worst finishes are on TVA lakes in general. My worst finish of all time was out here on Lake Chickamauga, and this is my worst tour event finish. And you know, it really was a huge stumble for me, because I not only dropped from 1st to 10th in points, but I also lost my huge lead in Rookie of the Year. Now I've only got a 31-point lead between me and Bradford Beavers, and then there's Ron Nelson behind him, and so I really have to catch him at Champlain, which I'm not too worried about. You know, there's nothing to be worried about. I really do feel like even in this event I fished well. I just didn't understand the dynamic of the spawning bass in Lake Chickamauga. It's a mistake I won't likely make again, and is something that I've definitely learned from. So I wouldn't say this was necessarily a bad event. As far as the results go, it was a terrible event. But as far as learning something and being able to have some takeaways from this event, it was very valuable. It's something that is going to help me in the future, and hopefully in the future where you know, Angler of the Year is reliant on a good finish here. The information I've learned will help me. But anyways, we're still, you know, we're still looking good as far as Rookie of the Year. We still have a lot of work ahead of us. Lake Champlain is going to be something that I'm really looking forward to. It's a great fishery. It's going to be another one of those events where, you know, a good solid 15-pound bags a day aren't going to do much, and you need to get those bigger fish. And that's kind of a situation that sometimes I struggle in. I like the tougher tournaments, the ones where, you know, you catch a limit, you're looking solid. But other than that, you know, I'm ready for the challenge, and so let's get up to upstate New York, Vermont, go fishing on Lake Champlain, and have a good time. But for now, I'm gonna head out on Lake Chickamauga, learn from my mistakes, figure it out, And that's what it's all about, is taking your failures and making them work to your advantage for the future. And that's what I'm going to do today. So thank you guys very much for all your support. It really does mean a lot. You know, we're still having a really good season, and I'm looking forward to the next event, because I know that I can keep this momentum going. A little stumble is not going to stop me, and I'm definitely not going to let one bad tournament define my entire rookie season on the FLW Tour. So thanks again, guys. I look forward to seeing you on the water.